The media is an ever-changing medium affected by many factors that impact its structure and its content. Whether you watch from a television in your home or online through Netflix and Hulu, nowadays with a simple push of a button or the click of a mouse, our lives are affected.
You want me? 60 pesos.
As time changes, the way in which various topics are presented have undergone a revolution of sorts, Latinos being one of them.
Part of it is the population shift, right? We have been slow to kind of embrace the power that we have in numbers. So I think that's incredibly valuable once we realize the power and potential that we have. We are consumers of media. We enjoy watching television just like other demographics do.
Hispanics now rank as the largest ethnic group in America. According to the U.S. Census, 17% of the nation's total population is Hispanic.
If you look at proportionally, Latinos are now 17% of the United States population. And if you wanted to get really mathematical about it, I'm sure we are nowhere near 17% main characters being Latino or Hispanic in the United States. So I would say we have a ways to go.
Despite the increase in population, experts say Latinos remain to be misrepresented and even underrepresented in both the big and small screens.
There's a bit of a lag, by the time programmers and marketers and managers realize, oh, we have a large Latino population, that's always a little bit later than, others, especially Latinos. They could have told you that they were a very sizable population years ago, but it takes industry a while to catch up.
Hispanic actors are often shown as lazy, oversexed, or more recently as violent drug lords, while women appear as maids, submissive, or hot-blooded spitfires, and the object of male fantasies.
For female Latina characters, often over time, the roles were, and we should say that it's not necessarily a bad thing to be portraying a person who's a working class person, who's a laborer, a farm worker, building trades, a maid. But it's the way in which people are kind of forced to portray those situations. And so it's very common if you follow Mexican television to see kind of the darker skinned maid who's kind of the mother behind the scenes, who's the real mother. And then the kind of more wealthy mother is distant, or she's a gossip.
On the one hand, you have mainstream media realizing that the Hispanic audience is growing, 53 million and going, 17% of the population. And they know that this growing audience is going to want to see themselves portrayed as something other than gangsters or people from the barrio, being portrayed as people who are lawyers, doctors, competent, who can be leaders, who do not have to be second banana to a detective or a cop, or in the back of a police car for that matter. So I think it's one that is evolving, and I think there is pressure on mainstream media to realize that the same depictions that we're used to of Hispanic Americans and Hispanics at large need to change.
¿Qué Pasa USA is a show that ran from 1977 to 1980. The producers of the show received a grant intended for minority groups. With it, they created the first bilingual situation comedy show in America. Reruns continue to air on PBS today.
We are part of the new USA.
Luis Santeiro, a head writer and composer for ¿Qué Pasa USA, says the show focused on a family who migrated from Cuba, going through the process of assimilation in Miami.
They wanted it to be 50% English, 50% Spanish. So we actually had readers who would read and make sure. Of course, when the actors were taping in front of a live audience, sometimes they would go up on a line, and particularly the ones who played the parents, who had most of the bilingual dialogue, if they went up on a line, they would ad-lib in Spanish. So even if we counted words, and it was pretty much 50-50, by the end usually had a little more Spanish than English.
It was a three-generational show where the grandparents would not speak any English, and the kids wouldn't want to speak any Spanish, while the parents fluctuated between both languages.
So I ended up doing the bilingualism in those scripts, and I think I got the sense of how to do it without repeating every single word. So we would obviously anybody who was monolingual would lose, obviously, some jokes, but you didn't lose the thread of the story. And in fact, we also had monolingual readers read the scripts to see if they more or less got the gist.
They'll never pass. Sure they will. How? There are ways. Hay muchos truquitos. Like the trick about the yes and no questions. What trick is that? My mother figured out that on the yes and no questions, there is 80% chance that the right answer will be yes.
Do you swear that your answers to these questions will be truthful?
Yes. ¿Qué te dije?
Sí, ay, qué bueno. Are you willing to take full oath of allegiance to the United States?
Yes.
Muy correcto.
Sí,
Nada más, estamos hechos.
yo creo que no vamos a tener ni que estudiar.
Have you ever committed adultery?
Yes.
Have you ever been arrested for the possession of drugs?
Yes.
Have you ever engaged in prostitution?
Yes. Yes, very good. I like it very much.
Latin people say, oh, I'm not really represented and all that, but back then, you can imagine, it was over 30 years ago, there was nothing. If there was a Latino on TV, even now, there are a lot of mostly drug dealers, but back then, the few that there were not, anybody who you identified, or you wanted to identify with.
While the show is only meant for viewers in South Florida, due to good reviews, PBS picked it up nationally.
Because we got this little grant, which by Spanish TV standards, we had a very nice budget, but by American, certainly Hollywood standards, it was a pittance. But they left us alone. We had a representative from HEW who would come once a year and more or less overlook, and he was happy, but every script wasn't scrutinized word by word. So we got away with a lot of stuff that, had it been network, even now some of the things wouldn't get through,
Que Pasa USA was one of the few shows in the 70s that Hispanic families could identify with, Santeiro says. Fast forward to today, and Que Pasa USA can be easily comparable with the George Lopez show.
So I think that people were really typecasted into a very particular kind of uneducated role, in the late 60s, early 70s. I think that's changed dramatically as we've seen, George Lopez, who had a show on ABC that really gave insight to Latino families outside of Los Angeles. So I think that really helped change the way in which people perceive Latinos, families, and their portrayal in the media.
The George Lopez show is about a Mexican-American family and also focuses on 3 different generations. Each stage projects an age-diverse representation that informs and influences the way people view their role in the family and in society. For example, in both shows, the mothers, Juana and Angie, embody the traditional Latino caretaker type. They exemplify all the attributes of motherhood associated with Marianismo, an aspect of Hispanic American folk culture, depicting feminine virtue and moral strength.
Now, if Castro were here right now, I would rip his head off with my bare hands and put it on backwards, so that he would have to look at his own butt while I kicked it.
It's go time! You should see your face.
Ven acá, comunista!
Hey, make him all the sandwiches you want, Angie. I'll just add it to his tab. That's right. Let me see, that's $10 for 2 sandwiches and $15 for that steak you ate on Friday. Oh, and $1 for every time you said Castro or Cuba or Oye Chico. So let's see, that's $17,050 minus the $17,000 for the garage. So you owe me, look at that, man, $50.
Oye, Chico, this is insane.
51.
Paul Ortiz, the director for UF Samuel Proctor Oral History Program, says Hollywood plays a big role in either maintaining, furthering, or disrupting and challenging cultural labels in society.
Overall, I would say it's a story, it's a mixed story. It's not a story of progress. It's a story of some advances and some defeats.
Others, like Olivia Garcia, the director of UF's Institute for Hispanic and Latino Cultures, disagree. Garcia says she's glad Hispanics are getting more airtime, despite the stereotypes. She uses the TV show Devious Maids, which is about 4 Latina maids who work for the rich and famous in California, as an example.
What we have to remember about Devious Maids, and I think people will disagree with me, and that's fine. Latina actresses are working and getting paid for their craft, and they have chosen to take on this part that was written especially for them. So whether little girls grow up and see shades of brown women on television and get inspired, who are we to say that that particular role isn't significant?
Ortiz believes things can change if more Hispanics are not only in front of the cameras, but behind the scenes as well.
I think we've got to become more engaged in actively offering people new ways to portray us. Because one thing we've learned from Hollywood, from television, from radio is the mainstream is not going to change its portrayals of us unless we give them material and really begin to demand that they step up.
The director for the Gainesville Latino Film Festival, Victoria Condor-Williams, made her way to the United States from Peru 20 years ago. She realized right away that the media did not display enough films or TV shows featuring Latinos. This is why she helped start the Gainesville Latino Film Festival a decade ago, an event created to give Latin American directors and actors the opportunity to present their content here.
To make a change, we need to have many leaders, in our own communities, that request, more representation in the media, so we can have at least the chance to give the community in general, to learn about our issues and to learn how to integrate not only one side, but I think that this community in general in the United States come through many other communities, that are migrating to the United States. So I think that that is so important to look at and to start working as Latinos here to have a representation, something that I think that is moving little by little.
Anthony Palomba, who teaches TV and American Society at UF, says Latino stereotypes sometimes surface as a subconscious reaction. Other times it manifests as a deliberate attempt to justify history.
Sometimes stereotypes resonate with people. It doesn't mean they're correct. It doesn't mean that it applies to everyone. But some people might look at some stereotypes and say, that's authentic. That happens in Italian-American families. That happens in Hispanic families. That happens in Irish families. Whatever race or ethnicity that you're looking for. Sometimes people will look at that and say, well, where's the overcompensating mother? Or this or that. So these are cultural artifacts that bring the show a level of authenticity. However, it can also be deemed offensive by some.
However, one thing everyone I talk to can agree with is that the portrayal of Latinos in the media is an aspect that has influenced the development of mass communication throughout the ages.